Good morning, guys, or whatever time this is now when you watch this. I've got Betsy joining me today, sorry. So doing the best we can right now. Sorry, I wanted to get this video out earlier, but we were out of town, and so I'm gonna try to get one out today, and I'm gonna get another one out tomorrow for you guys. Be prepared that next week we're gonna have a quiz. Study, I think everybody has their textbooks now. Be sure and study the vocabulary words for the first 2 chapters in your book, or whatever it says on your syllabus. I think everybody's books are different for last week and this week. I'm not sure yet what day the quiz will be because I'm still trying to figure out Blackboard, but I'll let you know next time I record a video, and then I'll post it in Blackboard also about how we're gonna do our quiz. So we're gonna have 4 quizzes, and the first one is gonna be next week, so get ready. I'm gonna try to breeze through American citizens and political culture for you guys right now, and hopefully Betsy is gonna let me do this. I'm really sorry. All right, so I hope you guys are figuring out this online learning business. Oops. And that everything's going okay. Please email me if you guys have any questions, or just if anything else is going on, if you want to know anything. I'm happy to help. I think we're all kind of learning this all together. All right, so American citizens and political culture. What's at stake in immigration policy? You know, we grow up in our country kind of hearing about America as this melting pot. You know, we have a melting pot of cultures and ethnicities. But, you know, we also say that your own identity needs to be preserved and honored, or it will be lost. You know, we have 2 different parties in this country. You know, we have the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, and the Republican Party tends to have a different view of immigration than the Democratic Party. Caveat, I have always worked for the Republican Party. I currently work for a lobbying firm that is bipartisan. We represent both sides, and so I try to be as bipartisan as possible, and I want to be as bipartisan as possible when I'm talking to you guys. But if anything, if I ever kind of slip up, just know that's why. I don't mean it in any kind of way, but that's my background. I've always worked for Republicans. So anyway, Republicans tend to have one view of immigration, and Democrats tend to have the other. In 2013, there was an immigration bill that passed the Senate that had a very tough border security part of it. It was a 13-year path to citizenship for those that didn't have proper documentation. Speaker Boehner was the Speaker of the House at the time, and he couldn't get his own party to agree on this legislation. I was working for Congress at that point, and it was a really interesting time because the whole Republican Party couldn't agree on what we wanted to do with immigration reform at that point. It was a big priority, and President Obama was president at that point. He had an executive order that he signed, and we'll talk about executive orders more later on, about regarding Dreamers, the undocumented immigrants brought here before they were born, when they were small children. Those are Dreamers. The Supreme Court deadlocked on this, and it put an indefinite hold on that executive order, and this became immigration then became a toxic issue for Republicans, and really a challenge for our country as a whole. We still struggle with we still struggle with how to deal with immigration as a party, as Republican Party, and as a country. Regarding immigration, everybody kind of wants their own narrative accepted because that's their form of political power, right? If you are a Republican in charge, you want your narrative to be in control because that's how you have power. Politics, who gets what and how. Politics, or what we want from a government and how we try to get it, really stems from who we are. It's important to understand where American citizens have come from, what is brought with you, what your lives look like, how do you spend your time and your money, what do you believe, how do you act on your beliefs. This is important when you're deciding on what to fight for and who to fight for politically. There are a lot of statistics that help with this, but how can a single government really represent all of those different ideas? You have so many different ideas about different things and immigration in this country, and it's really hard for one single government to represent all of that. So who is an American? You have a native-born people, you have naturalized citizens, but citizenship is more than a way a government should treat a resident. It is a legal status. Do you think you should be able to lose your citizenship? Americans are usually born, not made. If you're born here, you're called an American, even if your parents aren't. This is called jus soli, or the right of the soil. There's also jus sanguinis, I don't know if that's how you say that, the right of the blood. that even if you're born outside the United States, but you're born to American citizens, you're still an American citizen. So say, for instance, your parents are Americans, but you were born in England, you'd still be an American citizen. You can also be a dual citizen if your parents hold a citizenship in another country. So say, for instance, you were born here, but your parents have a British citizenship. You can maybe have both citizenships that way. Requirements for citizenships as they affect people born outside the United States change frequently over time. And immigration policy really changes a lot. Immigrants are citizens or subjects of one country who move to another country to work or to live. If you follow the proper channels, you can maybe be eligible to become a naturalized citizen. Naturalization is the legal process of acquiring citizenship for someone who has not acquired it by birth. Most Americans are immigrants or have descended from immigrants, but ironically, we want strict limits on who else can come behind us, right? Like, not really many of us come from people who are from America, right? We're all from somewhere, even if we came over on the Mayflower. Non-immigrants, a lot of people who come to the United States are not legal permanent residents. They are non-immigrants. Some arrive seeking asylum, which is protection or sanctuary, especially from political persecution. Or they're refugees, individuals who flee an area or a country because of persecution on the basis of race, nationality, religion, group membership, or political opinion. Who can be considered a refugee is really a political discussion, and it can raise a lot of security concerns. Legal permanent residents have rights and responsibilities here, just like if we are visiting another country. There are legal protections and a due process of law. You can't be discriminated against. But your rights are limited, and you can't vote or decide to live here permanently without permission. Immigration policy. I took an entire immigration class in law school, so this is a lot. I'm going to say that a lot this semester because I think a lot of the things we cover you could spend an entire semester on. We kind of brush through things pretty quickly, but immigration law is generally made by Congress with the approval of the president. I worked for the Judiciary Committee for a while when I was in Congress, and they handle immigration. And so I spent a lot of time working with immigration policy. It is very complicated. So we're just very much brushing over it. After September 11th, there were security concerns about who can enter the country. They moved the Department of Homeland Security out of the Department of Justice and created its own department. It is now the Department of Homeland Security was created after September 11th to work on immigration policy, basically. No country can absorb everybody who wants a better or safer life, right? Who can be admitted is a political decision. Nativism is the belief that the needs of the citizens ought to be met before the needs of immigrants, right? Nativism really took on a lot of political force with President Trump. Jobs are a very scarce resource over which political battles are fought. If times are good and unemployment is low, newcomers who want to do the jobs that we don't want to do are often welcomed. But if the economy is bad, a lot of jobless Americans get bitter about immigration because they're saying, oh, these are jobs that I want. But if the economy's good, you don't necessarily want those jobs, right? Immigrants are typically large consumers of social services and community resources. They do usually pay taxes and serve through labor, but some areas are still more burdened by social services to immigrants than others, and that's become kind of a sensitive issue. Being part of a majority is a source of political power, and so people really want to fight for that. And a majority can look like anything. It can look like immigrants versus non-immigrants, all sorts of different, Republican majority versus the Democratic majority, but that's a source of political power oftentimes, and people will fight for that. We want people who are going to come here to do a job that we maybe don't want ourselves or we can't do ourselves, and a lot of times immigrants will come here to do typically agricultural work that Americans don't want to do for such low wages, but maybe we don't want them to also be a burden on social services. It's a really complicated issue. A lot of border areas have problems with unregulated immigration. Communities can be swamped with maybe poor and unskilled residents. Kids need to be in school, so they're entitled to social services, which creates a financial burden. But a lot of them work off the books, which means they don't contribute to the tax base. It gets really confusing. Tax money is generally federally distributed around the census count, which we are in the middle of right now. Make sure that you guys have been counted in the census because it really helps us determine where the tax dollars go. There are a lot of undocumented immigrants who do pay taxes and obey laws and participate in the census and things like that. A lot of them have children who are citizens, and they are very well integrated into the communities. So sometimes it's hard to really find and identify these folks and repatriate them. But is that even the best solution? Immigration law today. So Obama took executive action after Congress failed to pass the DREAM Act, like I talked about earlier in 2013, that would have allowed for alien minors to earn legal residency through higher education or in the military or doing military service. They sent this back to the lower court where it remains today. A lot of states acted on their own. In 2010, Arizona made it a crime for an immigrant to fail to carry documentation. They had to have their paperwork with them at all times. This really led to racial profiling. You'd have a police officer pulling somebody over just to demand to see paperwork. It was difficult. So that law was struck down in 2012 by the Supreme Court. And it said that states can verify the status of who they stop, but they can't infringe on federal rights to set up immigration policy. So it really kind of limited that. This country has always been an experiment, right? I mean, that's what our founding fathers came here to do. They had into this experiment in government. It still is an experiment in government, but how do we define what an American is? How do we keep the republic? How do we do it through laws? Do we do it through papers? It's really difficult to think about. There are a lot of ideas that unite us in this country. We make a single nation out of a diverse group of people, which is a really difficult thing to do. But we all share a lot of fundamental attitudes about how the world works and how it should work. Political culture. This is the broad pattern of ideas, beliefs, and values that a population holds about its citizens and government. When we say Americans think, we a lot of times mean most Americans hold these views. We share values, the central ideas and principles that most people agree are important. There is a faith in rules here. We talked earlier about procedure. We have our procedural guarantees here in this country. Procedural guarantees is a government assurance that rules are going to work smoothly. It's not going to guarantee an outcome, but it's going to guarantee that you have rules that are set in place here. We think a government should guarantee a fair process, a free market to distribute goods, a majority rule to make decisions, due process to determine guilt and innocence, things like that. Sweden and countries like that believe that the government should actively seek to realize values of equality to guarantee a certain quality of life, to increase equality of income, and that government can be evaluated by how well it produces those substantive outcomes, not just by how well it guarantees a fair process. What do you think the right thing to do is? Should we guarantee the process or should we guarantee the outcome? Americans are more comfortable ensuring that things are done in a fair and proper way and trusting that the outcomes will be good because the rules are fair. We're still involved with social programs and welfare like Obamacare. We aim more to teach a man to fish or getting folks on their feet so they can participate in the market rather than cleaning up slums or eliminating poverty. Individualism is the belief that what is good for society is based on what's good for individuals. Individuals are responsible for their own welfare. This contrasts with the collectivist point of view that gives government or society some responsibility for individual welfare and holds that what is good for society may not be the same as what's good for the interest of individuals. Americans, we don't love paying taxes, right? Though maybe we love giving private donations to things, but a collective interest is usually invoked in times of war or national crisis. Like after September 11th, a lot of people were very supportive of this country. Sweden and countries like that are more collective and have more substantive social policies because they have a sense of themselves as a collective whole. To help one is to help all. They value solidarity, group identification, and unity that allows them to entertain policies that we wouldn't consider. So, for instance, Sweden once used pension funds to help equalize the wages of workers, but Americans would say this violates their sense of individualism. So it's interesting to think about. America is we're not wholly procedural and we're not wholly individualistic, but the differences are usually partisan on that and more prominent in the United States than in other nations. The United States and a lot of Scandinavian countries are all capitalist democracies that agree that individuals should make most decisions about their own lives, but Scandinavian countries tend to have a greater tolerance for some substantive economic policy than the more procedural policies in the United States. Americans, we put a high degree of value on freedom. Freedom is defined as freedom for the individual from restraint by the state. This is procedural. We don't have unfair restrictions that should be put in the way of pursuing what you want, but we aren't going to guarantee that you can achieve these things. The Bill of Rights, this is proof of America's commitment to the procedural freedoms. This is guaranteeing your basic civil liberties where the government can't interfere with individual action. Equality, we cast this more clearly in procedural versus some substantive terms. Hello. We guarantee equality of treatment, access, and opportunity, and not of results. We have equal access to run the race, right? but not everybody can finish in the same place or even start from the same place necessarily. But we can all run the same race. So there are some ideas that divide us. We have differences over how much government control there should be in our lives. Oh, Bets, let me get through this. Ideologies. That's a set of beliefs about politics and society that help people make sense of their world. This is based on normative prescriptions. It might seem clear to one person, but another person thinks that person's wrong. So we debate and argue and have become more passionate and polarized lately. We'll talk a lot about the polarization of our country right now. Conservatives are people who generally favor limited government and they're cautious about change. The conservatives are usually considered the Republican Party. They tend to promote social values, distrust of government action, except for in matters of national security, and they're resistant to change and maintenance of a prescribed social order. Liberals are people who are generally in favor of government action and view change as progress. This is usually considered the Democratic Party. They tell a narrative based on potential for progress and change, trust in government, innovations, and answers to social problems, and expansion of individual rights and expression. In the 1930s, the Great Depression really set apart Republicans and Democrats on how much they trusted the government to regulate the market that couldn't regulate themselves. Conservatives really think that the government shouldn't have too much power, and liberals really want the government to regulate the economy, saying that unregulation causes poverty. The social order dimension. In the 80s and the 90s, people were meeting basic economic needs, and many people were identified as middle class. So they began to focus on morality and the quality of life. How much should the government be involved in protecting individual rights and procedural guarantees of equality and due process? Or should the government be making more substantive judgments about how people live their lives? Conservatives really emphasize religion, they reject abortion, promote traditional family values, emphasize the American way. Liberals tend to preserve the environment, create a sense of community based on equality, and promote individual safety. There are economic liberals, people who favor an expanded government role in the economy, but a limited role in the social order. They're economic conservatives. Those are people who favor a strictly procedural government role in the economy and in the social order. There are libertarians, people who favor a minimal government role in any sphere. Social liberals, they're people who favor greater control of the economy and social order to bring about greater equality and to regulate the effects of progress. Poor Betsy. Communitarians favor a strong substantive government role in the economy and social order, so their vision of a community of equals can be realized. And then social conservatives. Those are people who endorse limited government control of the economy, but consider government intervention to realize a traditional social order. This is based on religious values and hierarchy rather than equality. So who fits where? Most of us kind of fit somewhere in between all those boxes. Nobody really is squarely in one category or the other, and I feel like that's probably true for most of us. The Tea Party movement, that was named for the Boston Tea Party rebellion against taxation in 1773, is a very pro-American agenda, anti-corporation, anti-government, really shook up the Republican Party in 2010 and challenged a lot of people in office who didn't share their ideology. That was a large part of why Speaker Boehner had trouble getting his own party to vote on immigration reform. The Tea Partiers really kind of had their own agenda, and it was a really interesting time to be in DC to watch the party kind of split like that. The Tea Party doesn't really have the power that it used to. I don't even think it's considered a party anymore. I think they go by the Freedom Caucus now. But it really shook up the Republican Party, and it was interesting to see kind of who could get what done. It also kind of brought about the changes in 2016. In the 2016 election, there are social scientists still trying to figure out what happened in the 2016 election, believing that social conservatives are attracted to authoritarian narratives, that they're seeking to secure the old order by excluding a perceived danger. And that's kind of maybe why people really are attracted to Donald Trump's message. There are Democratic Party splits. They're more minor than these Republican splits. They satisfy economic liberals who are procedural and social liberals who are substantive. There are kind of a gap between the Democratic narrative and the practice of American politics. So we have a core value as Americans, and that's democracy, right? We all value democracy. This unites those who are born here and those who are new immigrants. We are all united in our belief that we are a strong democracy. We are more democratic than we were 200 years ago. Women, African Americans, 18-year-olds can vote, but voter turnout's pretty low, guys. Most Americans are pretty apathetic towards politics, and even in 2018, when we had a very high, or 2008, we had a very high turnout, only like 60% of people voted. 60%, guys, think about that. That's really sad. I want you to really take more than anything from this class, how I think it's very, very important to vote. Very important. Do you think you're being heard in other groups? You know, are you being heard in maybe like an environmentalist group you're part of, or your church? How do you think your voice is being heard? Is this a true civic crisis, or is your voice being heard at all? You know, it's important to go to the ballot box to make sure your voice is being heard there. I'm gonna give you another free pass today since I'm late getting this uploaded, but I want you to think about these 3 questions. And we'll kind of expound upon this next class. How do you define American? What is an American? How do you think we should maintain the republic? Do you think we should do it through laws, through paperwork? You know, how should somebody become an American citizen? And what is the role of immigration and the meaning of citizenship in the United States? So how do we define what an American is? Mostly I want you to think about that. What do you think an American is? How do we maintain the country the way it is now? And what's the role of immigration and the meaning of citizenship in our country? Those are some things I really want you to think about, and we'll talk about that more next class. Next class, I'm going to get one more video uploaded this week, and I will post some instructions about what we're doing about a quiz next week. We're going to make sure we're getting through our syllabus on time. But if you have any questions, please let me know. Don't hesitate to reach out. I really appreciated hearing from all of you guys earlier about what you would do if you were president. I think that was really interesting and a good exercise. Look for one more video this week and a quiz next week, and I will see you guys soon. Thanks.